My son asked me once why we didn't have a bigger house. He was 7. We were at a birthday party for one of his classmates, and the house was the kind of house that has a name, like a real name, carved into a stone at the entrance. There was a bounce castle in the backyard that was larger than our living room, a catered lunch, a magician, gift bags on the way out that probably cost more than most people spend on the actual gift. And on the drive home from the back seat, completely casual, he goes, "Dad, how come we don't have a house like that?" And I just sat with that question for a second, because there were so many ways I could answer it. I could tell him the truth, that we could have a house like that if we wanted one. We've just chosen not to. I could deflect. I could turn it into a teaching moment about gratitude. I could lie. What I said was, because we have what we need, and a lot of people don't even have that. He seemed okay with it. He went back to his tablet. But I kept thinking about it for the rest of the day, because that question, innocent, offhand, completely unremarkable for a 7-year-old, is actually the question at the center of everything I want to talk about today. Not just, why don't we have more, but the whole framework underneath it. How do you raise children who are grounded, grateful, and genuinely good people when money is not, and never really has been, the limiting factor in their lives? How do you give kids everything they need without accidentally taking away the things that actually build character? Because I've seen what happens when that balance tips the wrong way. I've watched it in other families, and I've caught myself, more than once, on the edge of it in my own. This is what I've learned. The first thing I want to say before anything else is that spoiled is not really about money. I know that sounds counterintuitive. We associate spoiled children with wealthy families almost automatically. But I've met broke kids who were absolute nightmares. And I've met children from genuinely wealthy families who were some of the most grounded, empathetic, hardworking people I've ever known. Money is a factor. It can amplify things, but it's not the root cause. Spoiled, truly spoiled, in the way we all mean when we use that word, is about a specific relationship a child develops with discomfort. A spoiled child is one who has never been allowed to sit with wanting something they can't have, who has never had to earn something, wait for something, go without something, whose immediate discomfort has always been solved quickly by someone with resources and guilt. That pattern can happen in any income bracket. But yes, it is significantly easier to fall into when you have money, because the friction that normally creates character, the natural consequences of limited resources, has been removed. You have to replace it with something intentional, because it no longer shows up on its own. That's the core challenge, and everything I'm going to say builds from that. Let me start with the most foundational decision, which is how much your children actually know about your financial situation. This is something wealthy parents disagree on significantly, and I want to give you the honest version of both sides. Some families are open books. They talk about money openly, explain what things cost, discuss investment decisions at the dinner table, give kids an early look into the machinery of wealth. The argument for this is that financial literacy starts early, that secrets create mystique, and mystique creates problems, and that a child who understands money at 12 makes better decisions about it at 25. Other families practice what I'd call deliberate opacity. They don't lie, but they don't volunteer. They maintain a lifestyle that doesn't obviously signal wealth. They send their kids to normal schools, drive normal cars, take normal vacations, and let their children develop a normal relationship with limitation before the full picture comes into view. Both approaches can work. Both can also fail, depending on how they're executed. What I've found doesn't work at all, ever, in any family I've observed, is inconsistency. Telling your kid you can't afford something and then flying private 2 weeks later. Preaching humility while living in a way that makes humility feel like theater. Kids are not stupid. They notice the gap between what you say and what you do. And when the gap is wide enough, they stop trusting the lesson. So whatever approach you take, it has to be coherent. The lifestyle has to match the values you're trying to teach. That's the non-negotiable. Now let me get into the practical stuff, because I think that's where this actually lives. The first thing we did, and this is something I'd recommend to almost any parent regardless of financial situation, was to make the word no completely normal. Not punitive, not angry, just normal. Kids ask for things constantly. This is not a character flaw. It's just how kids work. They see something, they want it, they ask. The question is, what happens after the ask? In a lot of wealthy households, the default answer is yes, because why not? We can afford it. It's not worth the fight. And I understand that instinct. I've felt it myself. But every yes that's given out of convenience rather than genuine consideration is a small deposit into a very specific account. The account that tells your child that wanting something is enough to get it. What we started doing when our kids were young was applying a consistent pause. Not a no necessarily, just a pause. Well, think about it. That's something you could put on your birthday list. Let's talk about it later. The pause itself communicates something, that wanting doesn't immediately translate into having, that there's a step in between. For smaller things, a lot of those pauses became quiet no's that nobody even remembered 2 days later. The toy they desperately needed on Saturday was forgotten by Tuesday. And that forgetting is important. It teaches the child something true about desire, that it passes, that it's not as urgent as it feels, that you can survive not getting the thing. The second thing is work, real work, not fake work. This is where I see a lot of well-meaning wealthy parents go wrong. They want their kids to understand the value of earning, so they give them chores and pay them an allowance, which is fine. But sometimes the chores are performative, easily done, generously paid, no real consequence for not doing them. And the child figures that out quickly. It becomes theater. What I mean by real work is work that has actual stakes. Either the child does it and something gets done, or they don't do it and something doesn't get done, and they feel that. When my daughter was 10, she wanted a specific expensive thing. I don't remember what it was. And instead of buying it or saying no, I told her she could earn half of it. I set up a real project, not wiping down counters, but something that took actual effort over several weeks. She had to see it through, track her hours, and receive payment in installments. She got the thing eventually. But more importantly, by the time she had it, she had a completely different relationship with it than she would have had if I'd just bought it. She knew what it had cost her. She was careful with it. She appreciated it in a way she wouldn't have otherwise. That's not a lesson you can teach with words. It has to be earned through experience. The third thing, and this one is harder than it sounds, is exposure to real life outside your own circumstances. I don't mean poverty tourism. I'm not talking about driving your kids through a rough neighborhood once a year and telling them to be grateful. That's performative, and it's not actually effective. I mean, consistent, genuine, ongoing proximity to people who live differently than you do. The most effective vehicle for this, in my experience, is service. Actual service. Where your child is doing something useful alongside people from different backgrounds over a long enough period that real relationships form. The one-time food bank visit does almost nothing. The monthly commitment that lasts 2 years and where your kid starts to know the names of the people they're serving, that does something. That rewires the sense of what is normal, what is earned, and what is luck. Because one of the quietest but most destructive things wealth does to children is make their circumstances feel like the baseline. When everything you've ever known is comfortable, comfortable starts to feel like the minimum acceptable standard rather than a profound privilege. Sustained proximity to different circumstances is one of the few things I've seen actually correct that. The fourth thing is letting them fail. This one costs you something as a parent. It costs you a lot. When your child struggles with something, a class, a friendship, a team tryout, a project, and you have the resources to solve it, the pull to intervene is enormous. You can hire the tutor, make the call, smooth the path, and sometimes that's the right thing. But a lot of the time, the struggle is the point. Resilience is not something you can explain to a child. It is something they develop by being in difficult situations and coming out the other side. If you remove every difficult situation, you remove every opportunity to build it. I've watched kids from very wealthy families arrive at their 20s with no resilience whatsoever. Not because their parents were bad parents. Many of them were wonderful, loving, incredibly engaged parents. But they had intervened so consistently, smoothed so many paths, solved so many problems before those problems could build the character they were supposed to build, that the child arrived at adulthood in a beautiful car with no engine. Let them fail the class. Let them lose the spot on the team. Let the friendship end without you brokering the peace. Let them feel the consequence. And then be there, warm, present, not punishing, when they come to you on the other side of it. The fifth thing is talking about money honestly, but on a timeline that matches their maturity. You don't explain compound interest to a 6-year-old, but you also don't keep a child in the dark about financial reality until they're 22 and then drop it on them like a surprise. Both of those are mistakes in different directions. What I've found works is a graduated transparency. At 6 or 7, the conversation is about the difference between needs and wants. At 10 or 11, it starts to be about how money works, where it comes from, what it costs to run a household, what saving actually means. At 14 or 15, you start having real conversations about the family's financial picture, what it means, and what it doesn't mean. The goal of that graduated conversation is to produce a young adult who is not shocked by wealth when they eventually understand it fully, and who has not developed either entitlement or anxiety around it, because the information came all at once. One thing I want to say specifically about inheritance, because I think this is where a lot of families get it badly wrong. Telling a child early that they're going to inherit significant money is one of the most reliable ways to undermine their motivation. I've seen this happen. The child who knows at 16 that there's a trust fund coming has a very different relationship with effort than the child who doesn't know that. Why grind through the hard version of building something when the outcome is roughly the same regardless? The knowledge of future wealth is not inherently demotivating, but the knowledge of guaranteed future wealth, wealth that requires nothing of them to receive, can be. There's a difference between "our family has done well," and you'll understand more about what that means as you get older, and "you're going to be set for life." One invites curiosity and gradual understanding. The other can quietly drain the urgency out of a young person's ambitions. I want to take a moment and talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, which is the emotional complexity that wealth creates for kids themselves. Children in wealthy families often know, even without being told explicitly, that they have more than other people. They sense it. They see it in the way their house compares to their friend's house, in the vacations they take, in the clothes they wear, and a lot of them feel uncomfortable about it. They feel guilty. They feel weird talking about their life at school. They develop a kind of performance of normalcy that's exhausting to maintain. If you don't create space to talk about those feelings directly, children carry them alone. And they resolve them in one of two ways. Either they double down into entitlement, they decide the discomfort isn't worth feeling and that actually they deserve what they have. Or they develop a genuine shame about it that makes them resentful of the money and sometimes of you. Talk to your kids about the feelings, not in a way that asks them to feel bad about their circumstances, but in a way that acknowledges the complexity. It is both okay to have what we have and important to understand that not everyone does. Both things are true at the same time. Kids can hold that complexity if you give them permission to. Let me say something about schools, because the school choice is one of the most consequential decisions wealthy parents make and one of the least examined. Elite private schools are not inherently bad, but they do create a very specific bubble. When every person in your child's social world comes from a similar economic background, the range of what feels normal narrows considerably. The child loses access to the natural diversity of experience that would otherwise calibrate their sense of the world. Public schools are not inherently good either. The quality varies wildly, and the decision has to be made thoughtfully. What I'd say is this: if you choose an elite environment, you have to work much harder to compensate for the bubble it creates. The service commitments, the exposure to different circumstances, the explicit conversations about privilege, all of that has to be more deliberate because it's not happening passively. Whereas in a more mixed environment, some of that calibration happens just by virtue of who your child is eating lunch with. Neither path is wrong. Both require intentionality. I want to close with something that I think is the most important thing I've said today, and the easiest to miss. The goal is not to raise a child who doesn't know they're wealthy. The goal is to raise a child who knows they're wealthy and is neither ashamed of it nor defined by it, who understands that their circumstances are a combination of work, choices, and luck, who feels the weight of that luck as something that creates responsibility, not just comfort, who can sit across from someone with less and be genuinely present with that person, not guilty and performative, but actually there. That is a whole human being, and it is absolutely possible to raise one even when, maybe especially when, money is never the problem. My son asked me why we don't have a bigger house, and what I said was fine for a 7-year-old. But the longer answer, the one I'm still figuring out how to give him as he gets older, is something like this. Because the house isn't the point. Because things are not the measure of a life. Because the goal is to build something inside you that no one can take away. A sense of what you're capable of, what you've earned, who you are without the money behind you. And you can't build that inside a house with a name on a stone at the entrance. You can only build it the old way, slowly, through work and failure and empathy and time. That's what I want for him. That's what I want for all of them. And honestly, most days, I think we're going to get there. Thanks for listening.